Today we have our 399 episode. But this episode is very, very important for us because World Talent Economy Forum, with the help of Climate Change Departments, Malaysia, Ministry of Environment and Water of Climate Change Malaysia, we are working together and we are developing this dialogue, and it will be based on public-private collaboration for climate change for water security. World Talent Economy Forum, always we believe in national contributions, and we believe that with the open dialogue, we can go for global collaborations, and global collaboration help us to grow a sustainable economy. So we have our honorable speakers, His Excellency Dr. Ching To Kim, Deputy Secretary General, Water and Sewerage, Ministry of Environment and Water. He will go for opening remarks. Beside that, we have Mr. Marshall Marmal, CEO, Advanced Resilient Technology Limited, USA, Donald Staney, Social Capital Consulting, USA, Viva Candliff, CEO, Reduction Tech Canada, Dr. David Wood, Chairman of London Futurist, UK, Sheikh Rahman, Senator, Georgia from USA, Professor Dr. Adrian David Chiok, Professor at University Tokyo, Paul Beckwith, Climate System Analyst, Canada, Mr. Rob Enderle, Principal Analyst, Enderle Group, USA. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. This session is actually really important for Malaysia, and it will be telecast in Dubai Expo 2020. So I want to start from His Excellency Dr. Ching To Kim, Deputy Secretary General, Water and Sewerage, Ministry of Environment and Water, Malaysia.
Thank you, Sharif. First of all, let me say good afternoon to everyone here from Dubai Expo in Dubai. First and foremost, I would like to express my heartfelt appreciation and extend a warm welcome to distinguished speakers and participants of this open dialogue session. The Ministry of Environment and Water Malaysia, or known as CASA, is delighted to organize this session and proud that it is part of the Expo Dubai 2020. I believe that this will create a synergy between the main Expo teams of connecting minds, creating the future, and the Malaysian own team of energizing sustainability. As you know, Malaysia is part of the 192 countries that is participating in the Expo. We are excited to share with the rest of the world about Malaysia and showcase our effort under the following themes. Week 3 from 17th October to 30th October for green technology innovation. We are now here in week 4 that run from 21st October till 29th October under the theme for climate resilient and sustainable infrastructure. And week 5 from 31st October till 6th November for low carbon cities. For week 4, the ministry is putting together an impactful programs to kickstart the discussion and foster network to set strategic direction relating to climate actions and sustainable infrastructure. We are proud to present this high-level panel discussion and side events, technology showcases, pocket talks, and webinars to deliver insights and set the tone for climate resilient and sustainable infrastructure. The program will feature eminent speakers from policymakers, think tanks, corporate figures, and industry players from Malaysia and abroad. Distinguished speakers. Next, allow me to narrate the impacts on the climate change and the challenges it has on water security in Malaysia. Malaysia is blessed with an abundant rainfall with an average of 300 mm a year. But yet, in some part of the country, we are still facing a pocket of water problems, either due to severe droughts or a flash flood its occurrences. In addition, the existing water resources have been severely under pressure to meet the growing populations, expansion of activities on agriculture industry, as well as pollution to river course. The impact of climate change on water resources after the availability, quantity, and quality of the whole water cycle. This refer to the water demand, water resources, and water infrastructure. Climate change also contributes to the extreme weather, such as drought and floods, and these uncertain weather patterns requires water balance model and decision support system to be put in place for us to have a sustainable water management in the country. For an economy like Malaysia, the impacts like floodings and sea level rise would significantly make our existing infrastructure more vulnerable to climate change. Perhaps this approach can be extended through these networks and collaboration from this expo. For your information, Malaysia has launched the Water Sector Transformation Agenda 2040 to transform Malaysia into a water hub in the Asia Pacific region. Over the next 20 years, the water sector will be the key driver for economic development that contribute to the well-being of all Malaysians, and in line with the SDG 2030 and 2030 Sustainable Agenda of the Ministry. On the funding perspective, the water infrastructure in Malaysia are depending highly on public financing, which is not only limited but highly contested between various economic sectors. We believe that adequate technical and financial support is much needed to scale up adaptation by identifying technology needs and further develop capacity building in implementation of climate change action and disaster risk reduction, particularly in this water security. More investment are needed to ensure a climate resilient and sustainable development that respond to the post-pandemic economic recovery. This is why we are gathered here today, and I hope the discussion will identify key component for a new model for funding the water infrastructure projects in the country. And for your information, under the water sector transformation agenda, we have identified for the next 20 years, we need an investment close to 400 billion ringgit Malaysia to turn Malaysia into a water hub in the country, in the regions. We would like to establish a network of climate resilience among the global South policymakers, top CEOs, academicians, investment communities, think tanks, and corporations to collaborate and develop the resilient ecosystem. It is indeed a great honor and privilege for us to have this opportunity to have all of you in this discussion, and we look forward for impactful future collaboration in the area of water, environment, climate change, green technology, and sustainability. And as head of delegation of Malaysia, I would like to extend the invitation to all of you to join us during week 4 here in Dubai. And for week 25 and 26, that could happen next year, where we will discuss further on water and circular economy. I wish that we will have a fruitful discussion today. And for that, I wish all of you a fruitful discussion and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable His Excellency Dr. Ching To Kim, Deputy Secretary General Water and Sewerage, Ministry of Environment and Water. Thank you for your excellent initiative, and we believe that with your leadership under your umbrella, we get more chance to solve many complex problem, because we have our honorable speaker from academy, from industry, as well as from governments. Even we have our honorable senators from Georgia, USA. He is a part of Biden administration. So hopefully with our global collaborations, we can solve many problems. But sir, I just have one question to you, sir, because already many corporations from around the world, they actually joining in World Talent Economy Forum, and previously they asked me question, especially they want to know, can PPP companies be foreign company in Malaysia? And is there any specific strategy from your ministry? I think the different corporations can take initiative.
Maybe I can briefly explain on the PPP policy. Right. Previously, we have what we call it the Foreign Direct Investment Policy, FDI policy, that requires a foreign company to have a Malaysian registered company in the country in order to embark on business in the country, right? And as you know, previously we used to have, I would say, quite a number of foreign companies participating in the water sector in the country. We have from France, as you know, like Suez Environment, Lynos, Carapting. But I think on the more safer part, I would say I would encourage that you collaborate with the local partner to venture either in water projects, road projects, or other infrastructure projects in the country that we are providing. I would say there's a lot of room for investment in the country. As I mentioned, in water alone, we are looking investment to attain about 400 billion Malaysian ringgit for the next 20 years. And we welcome private investment for that to take us to where we want to go as one of leading water hub in the region. And we have other investment in other sector, energy, for example, environment, climate adaptation projects that we welcome private investment to the country. I hope I answered the questions.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. The last question from audience: what are the benefit of using public-private partnership from Malaysia?
You see, public partnership, I can go from two perspectives. You see, we know that publics, we are quite strong in terms of policy, I would say, the governance structure. We provide that to make sure that business thriving in the country. Private, we know you are good in project management. You have strong financial consideration, I would say. If we could come in and bridge these two strengths, I would say, we are okay in terms of policy, governance structure, that to allow you to thrive, and you come in with your own expertise in project management, financings. Then we see this the synergy between these two party will have something like something that we can go on a win-win situation between both parties, right?
Thank you. Thank you. From our honorable speaker, Senator Sheikhrahman, or other speaker, is there anything you want to add with our honorable Dr. Ching? Sheikhrahman,
thank
yes.
you. Thank you. Appreciate. Glad to be part of this great panel over here. And thank you, Honorable Dr. Ching, for your brief comment. I'm glad to hear that you're talking about that, public and private collaboration, and that's what we'll need, as we saw, especially after the COVID. Water security is interconnected around the world. It's not in Malaysia, will be a bigger issue all around the world. So I'm glad to see that we are talking about it and we are trying to do something about it all around the world. So this is not necessarily your issue. This is going to be a world issue. And I'm glad to be part of it. And I want to listen to some of the experts around here. I'm no way I'm an expert in this, but as a policymaker, I'd love to see and hear what's going on around the world. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Any other speakers? Just 30
I've got
seconds.
a question.
Okay.
Could I have an example of a private-public partnership that's done incredibly well in Malaysia? How well are they working there, and who's doing it best?
I can give you, I think, two projects, ongoing project that we have to turn the brownfield into something is something that we could be proud of, right? We have launched the so-called PPP in terms of land swapping projects, where we work with private company to develop a sewage treatment plant using a PFI or PPP methodology. And why this is important? Because we look this as the so-called the type of investment that we could bring in, private investment in the country. And just to give you a bit more example, in the water sector agenda 2040, we have identified PPP PFI as one of the key funding mechanisms to be further is explored in making Malaysia a water hub in the next 20 years. We welcome a further discussion on PPP, PFI, in not only in water sector, I would say, right? Energy sector, for example, RE, so on and so forth.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your excellent discussion. Thank you, Honorable Dr. Ching Tho Kim, Deputy Secretary General, Water and Shores, Ministry of Environment and Water, especially World Talent Economy Forum. We are advocate for modern science, engineering, and technology. And all of our speakers, actually, our Honorable Board of Advisors, and they are also supporting our initiative. And I believe Malaysia is an excellent place, especially I want to say this is our 399 episode. I always say that Malaysia is a place here every people is very peaceful. Malaysia is a peaceful country, and I believe I want to welcome more corporation, more people, more organization to come and visit Malaysia and make collaborations with Malaysian government.
And not only good people, but we have a good food as well.
Yeah, okay. Yes, I know.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I have a question for Dr. Ching. Do you have any?
Please.
Yes. Do you have any weather modification for the purpose of water supply management in Malaysia?
Okay, we have what we call it the Water Research Institute of Malaysia, right? They do all kind of modeling, I would say.
Okay. Do they do any weather modification?
To some extent, I would say yes.
Okay.
Yes, and if you would like to know more on that, perhaps you could email me. I will try to connect you to the directors of that institution, and then perhaps we could work out something tangible of that, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you are welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Now I directly want to go for this open dialogue. Thank you, Dr. Ching. First, I request Mr. Marshall from Advanced Resilient Technology Limited, USA.
Yeah, well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Excuse me for my poor connection. I'm actually in the middle of a climate change here. We have a flash flood warning talking about water, and we have a major storm event occurring here in the Northeast of the United States. So my company is involved in climate restoration and climate repair. And we have 4 fundamental technologies that help us address all these issues. And we connect a lot of the dots that have been discussed and presented by His Excellency, and will probably be presented by many of the presenters here. And so I'm proud to be a part of that group. I have a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm on my iPhone and it's not going to work. So I'm just going to be an oral presentation today. And if somebody wants more information, you can either hook up with me on LinkedIn or email me. Just to give us background, our company is has the honor of receiving a letter of fit from the Climate Bond Initiative in the EU to raise a significant amount of money, because it takes a lot of money to solve the problems for water, for air, improve soil health, and other climate impacts. So one of the things that we're doing is I noticed His Excellency mentioned brownfields. So we have 7 joint ventures where we turn brownfields into greenfields entities under the EU definition, and it has to be 100%. And under the taxonomy of the Climate Bond Initiative, it holds us strictly our feet to the fire. So there's no ability for anybody to even be able to claim greenwashing of any kind, which I think is a substantive issue going on around the world. I know that I heard one of our participants is going to be in COP. I'm going to be in COP virtually next week presenting. So I think it's really important for everyone to participate and step up to the plate and do what needs to be done. With regard to water specifically, what we do is we have a 4-prong strategy that, when combined, these technologies can actually address certain water issues. We don't claim to address all water issues, but some of the issues that we're addressing is reducing COD and BOD in water, but also from wastewater treatment plants. And ironically, we can turn that into a profit center for those wastewater treatment plants or sewage sludge plants. The other thing that we can do is we can address, which is very common around the world, toxic or harmful algal blooms. Harmful algal blooms are those algal blooms that come from bioswales and from runoff of NPK fertilizer into water bodies, and you create eutrophication, which is starving or reduction of oxygen in the water, and then you have these algal blooms that have neurotoxins in them. And if a pet or a child runs into that water, they could actually die. In a toxic algal bloom, it's the toxicity levels are so high that you can actually kill an adult. So one of the things that we do is we use two forms of biochar. Biochar has been defined as taking organic waste and converting it into a highly porous material. Some people confuse it with charcoal. It is not charcoal, but it looks like it. But some people even refer to it in the business as charcoal. It's not. So biochar is this highly porous material that has the ability to adsorb all sorts of things depending on its chemical construct, depending on what it comes from. So we have biochar that can be put in a filtration media and take out heavy metals out of water. Then we have another type of biochar that can extract NPK, fertilizer material out of the water, and that becomes the process of becoming a soil amendment, though you do need to add other materials to it. In addition to that, we have, after we process and take out the heavy metals if they exist, then we take out the NPK, and then what's left over is generally other pollutants in the water, and including bacteria. We use the bacteria for our ultra nano bubble generator to clean up the water and take out pharmaceuticals and other pollutants in the water. And then after that, we have an antimicrobial technology that's usually put through a sand filter, and it comes out.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, because we have to give opportunity to other speakers and we have a very tight schedules. So I think you over your 5 minutes. Thank you, sir. I directly want to go for yes, specific questions that from our audience. How does climate change affect water security? Just in 1 minute, sir.
So real quick, climate change is affecting water security because as climate change is not just one event or one element, it's not just greenhouse gas emissions, it's also other environmental impacts. And as it gathers an exponential speed, what we're seeing is more harmful algal blooms. We're seeing more destruction of water resources. And as everybody on this panel probably knows, all potable water, other than water that's done through taking salt water and converting it to clean water like they do in the Middle East and other parts of the globe, all your potable water is generally in aquifers. And a lot of those aquifers are being tainted by pollution from all sorts of facilities and factories. So we need to clean that up, and we need to do it now because time is of the essence.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Now I request Mr. Donald Stanley, Social Capital Consultant, USA. So you will get 5 minutes for giving the speech.
Okay. I want to first say that where I'm from, well, right now, we're also in the middle of a gigantic rainstorm. So I'm very, very happy that the power is actually up and that I can get to talk to you all. It's, we haven't, but it's the first rain we've had in so long. It's like I'm looking out there going, yeah, I remember this stuff from my childhood, which is a good example of how climate change is affecting us. We in California have been having gigantic fires and less water than we usually have, or less rain than we usually have. Basically, the greenhouse gases raise the temperature of the atmosphere, which causes more water to evaporate from the oceans and other places and get into the atmosphere. And so in some places it rains more, and because of the change in the wind patterns and other kinds of things, in other places it rains less, and we don't 100% know where that's going to happen. So we're all faced everywhere in the world with either too much water or too little water, and that's something we're all going to have to deal with at an increasingly rapid pace. I've come from an area that's probably, I would argue, the most successful public-private partnership anywhere in the world that's ever existed, Silicon Valley. People don't realize that Silicon Valley actually started out very, very, very much funded by the government. Hewlett and Packard's famous garage, their customer was the government. They made oscillators that were being sold to the government. When I first came to Silicon Valley in the 70s, it was Ford Aerospace, FMC, Lockheed, all these military companies. And so the tech companies at that time, their main customers were the government, and the government is still a huge customer of Silicon Valley. So one of the interesting facts about Silicon Valley is that the connections that were made can be attributed to some degree, a large degree, to IBM, who had a experiment that they ran where anybody at any company that created a patent with IBM could, they basically, at a university, somebody at a university that created a patent with IBM, IBM would pay for it, pay for them. And so IBM made relationships in that way, actual connections of people in their organization working together with people in universities. There's a paper about this called Why the Valley Went First by a guy named Lee Fleming. And so basically there becomes a virtuous cycle that creates wonderful public-private partnerships where you make a relationship between education and industry, and the government becomes the customer for it. Because oftentimes if there's one central place that's driving the thing, for instance, the government is in control of everything and they're the ones who are counted on for the innovation, you're going to get less innovation because really you need to have a variety of people trying different kinds of things. So for public-private partnerships, the most successful model is to be able to have the government be the customers, and the government, of course, then funds the education, and then the corporations, the education provides the people for the corporations, and the corporations use the government as their customers, and that works very well. However, Silicon Valley made a lot of mistakes, and some of the technology that's just coming out that's incredible right now. I don't have very much time, so I'm going to just mention blockchain technology, and I'm going to get back to IBM, because IBM worked with the state of California to use blockchain technology and Internet of Things sensors to start monitoring the water throughout the state of California. Now, what is blockchain technology? It's basically it's a distributed ledger. It's a ledger. It's just a way of keeping track of all of the transactions that take place, and in a way that you can't, just like double entry bookkeeping, that can't be messed with. It's and so in some countries, probably not necessarily. Well, in every country, in the United States and everywhere, one of the problems is corruption within when governments are hiring corporations or businesses to do things. So double entry bookkeeping, okay.
Thank you, sir.
That's where I'm going to go. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I want to take one question from audience.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Home Stoner, for joining today's session. Question from Professor Hayes. What are some of the ideals way to bring clean drinking water to my local environment? In 1 minute, if you respond this.
We're talking about the clean water process?
Yes, yes. Sir, now, sir, I will give you a chance. We are just discussing with Professor Donald. I will give you a chance. Professor Donald.
I'm presently in London. Just got off a train. I'm in a Starbucks where I could get some Wi-Fi. Anyhow,
Understand.
You're asking me the question, though, right?
Yes.
Okay. There's it really depends where you are. I mean, it's going to be wells, water, different dams, various kinds of wells, dams, various kinds of things, depending on what your water is. Your water may have to be brought from elsewhere. There's a possibility of desalinization. You have to look at what your water needs are for your specific area. If you're doing agriculture, you're going to need a lot more water than you're going to need if you specifically need to drink it. But the technologies are things that are reverse osmosis. There's a laundry list of different kinds of technologies to clean the water. You can contact me and I'll tell you. I'll send you information about that.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Professor Viva, CEO of Reduction Tech Canada. You will get 5 minutes for your speech.
Okay, let me share my screen here, and I encourage all the viewers to enlarge their viewing. Okay, so do you see the slideshow, Sharif?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm talking about atmospheric weather modification science and water management, and it's very interesting to learn that Malaysia is one of the 52 countries that is involved in weather modification science. And I'm just going to bring some information to the forum about the fact that the science is focused on releasing particulates. So that's the paradigm that's used in trying to stimulate clouds. So here we have 7 or 8 problems that are caused by the particulates. And it's actually quite well understood, aerosol forcing. There are scattering and absorption problems with aerosol, and we do have a lot of aerosol. In fact, science is saying that, up to 0.4 degrees Celsius of cooling is being offered by the particulate that we keep in the atmosphere. So there is also warming associated with it too that's getting more characterized. But some of the other problems are, increased cloud density number concentration or particle number concentration in clouds. And when there are larger particles like that, it's harder for the cloud to rain. So there's also drizzle suppression, and drizzling is, pre-full collection of a precipitation cycle, and after a precipitation cycle, you need to have that sort of smooth curve of going to the peak of the rainfall, and that's lost. So we end up with more extreme precipitation events. We also have increased cloud height as a problem, increased cloud lifetime, which, can be problematic. Cloud cycling is important for cooling cycles to occur. So I just wanted you to see that, the aerosol forcing that's caused by the particulate paradigm that we have going right now is a bit of a trade-off. So I'm going to introduce the hydroxyl radical, which is naturally occurring in the atmosphere. And I just want to read this out about how powerful it is. The hydroxyl radicals can effectively break double bonds, degrade hydrocarbons, cause epoxidation and aromatic ring opening, radical polymerization, formation of secondary radicals, and many other types of reactions. The radicals have an extraordinary ability to engage in reactions resulting in degradation, polymerization, addition, cyclization, as well as initiation, substitution, insertion, rearrangement, or termination. So this is why it's the magic bullet in the atmosphere. and is found everywhere ubiquitously. So in clouds, it's also involved in triggering precipitation. And I want to show that to you. But here is a diagram of what the standing cloud charge looks like that weather modification needs to contend with: the positive charge on the top and the negative charge on the bottom. And the electrons sink to the bottom of a cloud mostly. So that's a normal charge. And we have these particles that the hydroxyl will land on. The red and white molecule in this diagram is a hydroxyl, and the oxygen likes to attach to almost every particle or molecule in the atmosphere. There are a few gases that it won't attach to directly, and it creates this hydrogen spike. And you can see where I've got this blue blob of water molecules coming to touch this gray particle. The hydroxyl has a spike that pokes into the water, and it breaks the surface tension, and it actually causes, very similar to Velcro, the locking together and coalescing of the particle with the water. And this is what triggers collection, because they get bigger and bigger and bigger as the hydroxyl helps this process of adding water to particles. And then it's heavy enough to be taken out as rain. So this is the key geometry and physics in precipitation that we think is going to be more important, because standard weather modifications currently only has about a 30 to 35% increase record in precipitation. So, you know, their best result is about a 35% increase in precipitation. If they add this hydroxyl triggering back into their system, they would probably be able to double that easily. So my company is looking at developing hydroxyl production at scale. We can also make hydroxide, doubly ionized oxygen, and ground-based air ionizers would be added to work with this, so that it's a residue-free chemistry, which is important. There are no chemical consequences to life, and we know that our atmosphere is not only a water source, but it's also a dump for our combustion waste. So some of it continually removes pollutions and greenhouse gases when released. So we're going to encourage weather modification to look at this to add to their efficiency. And again, this is the trade-off we're living with, and that's what I think we will encourage in the future.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am, for your excellent analysis and presentation. Because of time, I do not take the question from the audience because of time is a big issues. Mr. Homestoner, I think he has an internet problem, but now I want to give chance Dr. David Wood, Chairman of London Futurist, UK.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be part of this virtual session today, here virtually in the Malaysia Pavilion. The headline for my talk is "Profound Challenges Demand Profound Solutions." It's as Albert Einstein once said, "A new type of thinking is essential if mankind is to survive and move toward higher levels." And the new type of thinking I want to advocate is a combination of inspiration from great solutions from the past and taking wise advantage of forthcoming new technologies. A combination of great hindsight and great foresight. And I'll give examples. Indeed, in my long career in the smartphone industry and as chair of London Futurists, I have come to appreciate that the best foresight often arises from better hindsight. So the example of better hindsight I want to show was described as follows. He made probably the biggest single contribution to the health of Victorian Londoners. I wonder if you can imagine who that person was or what their profession was. Here's another comment about his work. It was the most extensive and wonderful work of modern times. You may think I'm talking about a medical doctor such as John Snow, the renowned physician who became known as the father of modern epidemiology because of his painstaking scientific research that tracked down conclusively the cause of a terrible cholera outbreak to waste water, which was in the water system. But actually, the person that these quotes refer to is Joseph Bazalgette, a remarkable civil engineer known as the Sewer King. Here's one of his diagrams. He was charged with a bold project to bring London's aging, smelly, stinky water and sewage systems up to date in a hurry. So he envisioned building more than 1,000 miles of new drains under London streets, feeding into 82 miles of wide new brick-lined sewers, a kind of 19th century moonshot. And you can see that part of his plan was to take some of the land away that the Thames was currently occupying. This was the reclamation of 52 acres of land along the banks of the Thames, land that was particularly smelly and dirty. This provided space for some of these new huge sewers and also for an underground train line. And the land that was reclaimed is now some of London's most famous and established parts. The reason I pick this example, the reason I think we can learn from it, is first, it was a comprehensive solution that addressed a long-standing problem at its root. It used, at Bazalgette's insistence, some of the latest technology, more powerful pumping stations than ever, and new, strong, water-resistant cement that could last for centuries. He calculated the required diameter for all the pipes and then doubled it to ensure that this was a future-proof solution, as indeed is still in play today, 150 years later. One measure of the success of this great initiative was that when there was another cholera outbreak in Europe in 1892, for example, Hamburg in Germany had 9,000 people dying in short order. Hamburg was a close trading partner of London. People in London held their breath, as it were, but there was no cholera there, thanks to the great new treatment of sewage. Well, I said we should look at the past, but we also need to combine the new technologies. And the example I'll look at in the last 40 or 50 seconds is Genesis Systems, a company in Florida, USA, with their remarkable water cube technology, which has the ability to extract fresh water from atmospheric air, which is pumped through clever chemistry, including sponge-like nanofluid. And when I say clever chemicals, they were selected and identified using the latest AI. This is what these containers look like from the outside. They have the ability to extract 1,000 gallons of fresh drinking water a day in a variety of climates without any pollution or hazardous byproducts, off-grid, and with the optional extra of carbon capture coming soon. This is possibly an example of a profound solution for the profound problem of water shortage and climate change. And as has been commented by somebody who has looked at this system, a former NASA rocket engineer, this work is far more important than his previous work to put man on the moon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your excellent presentations. You also fill up your 7 minutes quota. So we want to go for the next speakers. We have our Honorable Senator Sonatas Sheikhrahman from USA. Yes, sir.
Sorry about it. I had some computer problem. I'll make my comment really brief. I'm really interested to hear from all the experts. As a policymaker, I'd rather hear from expert for the solution that we can bring forth. One of the things that I had so far, and I'd like to mention that any government or any policymaker, sometimes we look short term, as just Professor David Wood just said. We need to look beyond short term policy decision that we make anywhere in the world. We have to look for the longest term, how we can come up with a policy or whatever we do has a longer term effect, not necessarily on your community or your cities or your district, because water is something is so essential. It's a national security issue for every different countries. It's not only for Malaysia or any part of the world, because this is something is a government responsibility, just like to secure your border, secure your whatever you exist. But this is, as I said earlier, because of the pandemic, we are all interconnected. Doesn't matter which part of the world you are living in now. Because of pandemic, we realize how important it is to tackle anything within intergovernmental or government and the private. Because government cannot do by themselves any big task such as water security. So education and industry has to come together, work with some form and way in order to cooperate with the government to have a better security in terms of water or anything you mentioned. So this is really important issue. This is really beyond and above my pay grade, because I'm not an expert in this, and I think most of the panel is an expert. So I would probably save my time and listen a little bit more from the expert. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. There are few questions from our audience, sir, for you specifically, sir. You are also a senator from USA, and Biden administration is very proactive for solving this climate change. So what are the initiative actually your government taking right now, especially for these developing nations?
Well, we are taking a lot of, Biden administration is taking a lot of different initiative, as you know, as a divided government. So it's not necessarily, Biden administration set up the overall focus plan for the entire country. But as we say, as a part of the local, as a state government or local, I'll just give an example that we have in the state of Georgia, one of the state-of-the-art facility for water purification and the water treatment facilities. We provide, in terms of a state and our local government, through taxes, we provide those facilities to work for the people of our state of Georgia. So we have incentive that, in terms of private sector, help our local government to do a lot of work within the framework in our state and local government, not necessarily at the federal level government. So, as you say, we have to work between the federal, state, and the local government. That's the structure we follow. And education and the research comes in between. As just an example, in the facilities that we have in the state of Georgia, we have folks from University of Georgia, Georgia Institute of Technology, all the researchers, they come in and work in our facility. So there's a way that we try to incorporate it in terms of financing, and not necessarily financing, contributing from the government fund to those research. That's how the government works with the university and the institution, basically.
Thank you, sir. My last questions to you, because you are a policymakers, how we can develop better policy, like country like Malaysia and this kind of developing nations, and how different policy centers and organizations can help these developing nations to create better policy and to develop better strategy for public-private partnership.
Well, one of the examples, just like as we're talking now, people from experts from all over the world. So nowadays, everybody, all over in the world, people are working on the technology, and we have the resources. It's a lot easier now. Before, if you look at previously, 100 years ago, when Dr. Wood just mentioned about what was going on, what's going on around the world is pretty much open. We know what's going on. We can have best practices bring together from all over the world. We have all the resources, everything is open now, pretty much, what's going on around the world. So we have to find out which country, which university, which business organization, who are the ones leading in different field. If we can collaborate bring everybody together, then we can have a best practices in any countries in the world, especially the underdeveloped country or people don't have research. United States has one of and some of this European countries, even some of the Asian countries nowadays doing a lot of great research. So in order to bring the student, researcher, and policymaker together, we can solve this problem in the long term, but you have to have a bold initiative. As a policymaker, my job is to listen to the expert and to make a decision. I can make a decision myself thinking what I know. Of course, I have to make a better judgment, but the decision has to come from the scientist, from the researcher, from the entrepreneur. So we have to look at all different angles. That's the only way we can make a better decision.
Thank you, Senator Sheikhrahman. Actually, World Talent Economy Forum exactly working on that area. The government, corporations, and academia, we bringing together, and how we can work together, how we can develop better strategy for the developing nations, like country like Malaysia. This is our main objective. Thank you, Sheikhrahman, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Now, I request one of the famous speakers, Professor Dr. Adrian David Chiok. He's a professor of IU University Tokyo, and he's also one of the famous scientists. Professor Adrian.
Well, thank you, dear Sharif, and thank you to all the great speakers and Senator. Great to see you. I'm sorry to say I'm a little bit of a Trump supporter, but that's okay. We can still be friends. Anyway, I'm currently, because of the coronavirus pandemic, I'm stuck in my hometown of Adelaide, Australia. Japan's border is closed still, and so is Australia's border still closed. So, although I'm not sure for how long more, but I'm stuck here. But since I've been stuck here, I've learned quite an interesting thing about South Australia. I'm not sure about the rest of Australia, but I'm in Adelaide, South Australia. Actually, for this year, there was more energy produced by renewable energy than by the traditional gas and coal and other petroleum kind of methods. So actually, South Australia has an excess of power generated from the new sources, renewable sources such as solar and wind, etc. South Australia is quite a hot state. It's a little bit like I guess Texas or something in the USA. It's quite hot here. So now the energy companies have a problem where they don't have the ability to store that electric power, and so because they didn't expect so much power would be fed back into the grid. So there is a real issue now of where do you store all this power that's generated from solar panels, etc. And yes, you can use batteries and capacitors and things like that, but they are actually very expensive. So incredibly now in South Australia, if you feed energy back into the system, they charge you because they don't want that power. They don't know how to deal with it. So it's a very, very interesting situation. Maybe this is something we're going to have to think about. We can generate too much power from all these methods, and it's actually not so expensive now to generate like power from solar cells, etc. but it's still very expensive to store power, and power companies are not used to storing power. They don't have the facilities to do that. So I think this is a very interesting question. Batteries, capacitors, all these kind of things are going to be very important in the future. But yeah, so I think this is an interesting issue we should think about. When we finally get to the stage where we can go totally renewable, like in South Australia, then where do you store that power? Obviously, the problem with renewable energy is that at night time you don't really have it. The sun has gone down. So whereas with traditional power, you have a generator, and you use oil or gas, and you just turn it on when it is necessary. So we have to deal with new kinds of problems with renewable energy. It's not as simple and easy as we think. And incredibly, the power companies may charge you for generating too much power. So that's just my thought of the day. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Professor. There are some specific questions for you, Professor Adrian, because I knew you are AI expert. So Mohammad Sohail Rana, his question is, what kind of data do scientists use to study climate?
Yes. Well, okay. I should say I'm an electrical engineer, so I'm not really a climate scientist. But for the data, I think there's many measurements that are used for determining about the climate. The temperature, the mass of the polar caps. They're melting every year, getting smaller and smaller. So there's many data points that scientists use to determine about climate change. So like I said, one example is temperature. Another one is looking at the ice. How much ice do we have at the polar caps in terms of volume? I think climate scientists use all the data they can get to make a model about climate change. And now I do want to say something that, of course, the traditional thinking is climate change is a very bad thing, and I don't want to deny that has many negative things with climate change. But we as humans tend to think we are kind of like the Earth is same as humans, but actually the Earth will survive even without humans. It is the humans that might not survive, but other creatures might actually benefit from climate change. And I'll give you an example. In Australia, we have these creatures which are unique to Australia. They are flying foxes. They're not bats. They're like small possums with wings, and they can glide. But I think in America they have similar creatures. Now, they were only seen in the northern Australia until a couple of years ago, and suddenly they now are in the very southern Australia where I am. So if we ask those bats, they would say, yes, we're very happy with climate change. We're taking over Australia. I just want to put in a very radical thought that maybe some more intelligent creatures will come along after we kill each other with the climate change, and maybe there's going to be more intelligent creatures coming that will benefit from the climate change that we create. So anyway, it's always I think we should always think that climate change. We often just think about humans, but we are not the only creatures on this planet. The planet will still survive, and maybe different creatures will emerge, and maybe smarter than us.
Thank you, Professor Adrian David Chiok. Now I will request Mr. Paul Beckwith, Climate System Analyst, Canada.
Yes, thank
Paul.
you, Sharif, for running this program, and thank you to all the panelists and the people watching. People around the world are experiencing weather craziness. Call it craziness is as good a word as any. It's disrupting lives, people's work, destroying homes and cities and infrastructure all over. So the question is, why and how much worse will it get in the future? So I'm talking about abrupt climate system change, or another way to think of it is climate casino chaos. So we're living in a casino on the planet, and at any given time, our city or region could luck out in the casino, experience torrential rains leading to massive flooding or drought, or some turbocharged storm, some massive hurricane, etc., or even rising oceans, storm surges. So I call it weather weirding or weather wilding or weather whiplashing. The whiplashing where you might go from torrential rains and flooding inundation one year to a record drought the next year, back to record inundation the year after. I fully expect that this will get much worse quickly, and I expect it will hit the global food supply within a decade and cause global famine. Extreme weather events around the world are increasing in frequency, severity, and duration, and they're also happening in new regions where they did not happen before. The root cause on a human level is fossil fuel subsidies, accelerating and continuing the loading of the atmosphere with greenhouse gases, with CO2. The root cause on a physical system level basis is the Arctic warming, the huge Arctic warming, which is 4 to 5 times faster, not 2 times, it's 4 to 5 times faster than the global average. This huge increase in temperature in the Arctic is decreasing the temperature gradient or the temperature difference relative to the equator. And that temperature difference determines it's a reason why jet streams exist. So the jet streams are slowing and becoming wavier and becoming stuck because of this Arctic warming, and the jet streams guide storms, and they're the reason why we get the weather patterns that we see, and they're the reason why these weather patterns are changing, and we're getting the weather wilding and weirding, and the reason why I call it a climate casino, because your physical location on the Earth relative to the ridges of the jet stream, if it's stuck, you're in a massive heat wave and drought. And if it happens to get stuck, the jet streams, where you're in the trough in your location, then you'll get massive storminess and torrential rains and flooding and and that. So basically, the agricultural regions of the world, depending on where they're situated relative to what the jet stream is doing, are experiencing unbelievable conditions which are not conducive to growing food on our planet. So this is where we are. Obviously, as the Arctic continues to warm and we lose Arctic sea ice, we're fully expecting a complete loss of Arctic sea ice in the summer months. Within any year it could happen. The trends are down for Arctic sea ice, and this will cause a huge spike in extreme weather events globally around the world. And it's difficult for me to imagine that we can grow enough food for our globally when we completely lose Arctic sea ice. So that's basically the everything in a nutshell.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I want to take questions from audience. Okay. So, sir, anyway, there is a question from Onika Shams. How is climate change affecting farms and our food?
Well, farmers rely a lot on their built-up knowledge of their history on the farm. What the previous farmers were doing and growing, and they're also trying to grow crops that they can actually sell for a decent price. So, now we're in a different world where the weather is not doing what it used to do for throughout oral history. I mean, we're having droughts that are exceeding any previous droughts in that region. That's happening in many regions of the Southwest USA. There's other regions, look at some regions in Italy, for example, that grow lots of food, and they just experienced rainfalls that have not been seen in Europe ever before. We're talking huge numbers of feet, or huge number, like and like this 150 centimeters sort of a rainfall, 1,500 millimeters in a very short period of time in one region in Italy, for example. The flooding in Germany, torrential rainfall, which then went into the river valleys and took out a lot of different towns. The droughts in California and droughts in Greece and Southern Europe that completely dry out a region, including forested regions, and then any spark, sets off a raging inferno, which destroys cities, for example. Think of Lytton in British Columbia or Paradise in California. So, we're the vegetation and plants, the trees and forests that rely on that exist in a certain region because of the climate, because of the weather patterns, because of specifically the amounts of rainfall and the amount and the temperature, the average temperatures throughout the seasons. When all those factors, weather factors, are no longer stable, then there's no reason for those forests to be there. So when there's wildfires taking out forests in California, for example, why should we expect forests to regrow in those regions? The Amazon rainforest, the destruction of that, why should a rainforest replace what is lost? It's more, it depends on the precipitation at that time in that place. And, maybe grasslands will appear and not forest regrowth. So, we've completely changed the weather patterns on our planet at all latitudes because of our loading of the atmosphere with fossil fuels.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Now I request our world famous speakers, Principal Analyst Enderle Group USA, Professor Rob Enderle.
Yes, and thank you for having me last at 4 o'clock in the morning. All right, so we've covered a lot of topics up to now. One of the things that David Wood pointed out was the loss of aquifers. Many of those aquifers are collapsing. It means they can't be recovered, and that means we need alternate sources of water going forward, because as the different areas dry out and those aquifers collapse, even if we get heavy rains, they won't fill up like a sponge. They're pretty much dead. One of the programs that I was initially most familiar with was a program in Africa where a number of companies came in over a period of decades and tried to help with wells. And what would happen is they'd come in, they'd do the press event, they'd install the set of wells, and then within weeks, at latest months, those wells were either contaminated or they ceased to function. And this occurred over and over again. You'd have a press event, people put in wells, the wells would cease to function, and off we went. And then in about a decade ago, Cisco came in with a local partner, looked at the problem, realized that part of the issue was that the economies in the areas they're putting in the wells couldn't handle the technology that they were installing and didn't understand how water worked in terms of pollution. And so they went in with a new program, relatively low tech. The wells were then centrally connected using wireless technology so they could be remotely monitored. The citizens were trained in how to maintain the wells and also trained in how to keep them from getting polluted. So a substantial part of this effort had to do with training the citizens on how to deal properly with the environment. And the end result was the well stayed up for years and continued to operate, and you could move into new areas then, creating more wells going forward. The lessons learned is you can't just parachute in advanced technology into an area that it doesn't have the training or capability to maintain it. What happens if you do that is the technology will fail and the effort will be non-productive. And so the thing was this requires training, it requires using technology that can survive in the environment, and in many ways it requires a much lower tech approach to the problem. Another area with regard to technology and water is security. Here in Florida, we recently had an event where a hacker got in, changed the chlorine levels in the system to levels that were toxic, and could have, if it hadn't been caught, wiped out a substantial portion of that region's population over a very short period of time. Once again, the company that I'm most aware of that got involved in fixing the problem again was Cisco, because they saw it as a networking problem. But they're not the only company active in this area. IBM out of Almaden Labs is doing a substantial amount of work on establishing clean water, and they too were looking at technologies that can be supported in areas that don't have a high-tech base. But the end result is after going back through and securing the Albuquerque water system, they too were attacked, but the attack failed, and it was stopped at the source. So as we talk about these water programs, we also have to think about securing them so no hostile actor gets in and introduces a contaminant and turns the water production plant against its population. Two programs that I'm most interested in terms of dealing with water, both out of MIT. One of them has found a way to produce about 1.5 gallons of water per square foot of solar, relatively low tech, by using new materials and multi-levels. So when the water heats up one level, another level heats up, and you use the differential as well as the filtering technology to take the salt out of the water. And it's, once again, fairly low tech, primarily using hydrodynamics to move the water along, not using a lot of computer technology or AIs, because once again, many of the regions will not be able to support that technology at this time. By the way, that program is done in conjunction with China. MIT and China are working through showing that the two countries can cooperate on areas of common good and do so successfully. The other one out of MIT is pulling water out of air. That pulls about a quart of water out of air per every square meter of solar coverage area. Once again, not using solar panels, but using a combination of materials and a heat differential to pull the water out of the air. And while we've had several efforts actually at scale to pull water out of air, some of them require 100% humidity, so only in heavy fog will they work, or at least 50% humidity in order to function, which is fine if you're close to a coastal area, but not if you're out in a desert. This will only require 20% humidity, so relatively low to function and function at scale. So we are developing technologies that can solve the water problem. It's just a matter of matching the technology to the geography that's going to support it and making sure it comes in with training so that the local people can do it. And the best practice is still to use a local partner in order to roll this out. So the support structure comes in with the technology, and once it's in place, it can be supported and maintained. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Professor Rob, for your excellent analysis. We have a question for you from our honorable partners from Asia Pacific Green Caucus. He's a president for them. His name is Mr. Julkifli. His question is that carbon capture, how efficacious and how safe? If you give some analysis on carbon capture.
Well, the biggest carbon capture plant, I believe, is in Greenland, and it just came online just a while back. And it is fairly effective. The thing is you're doing it across a region as you're putting it in place, and ideally you might want to put those plants close to where the carbon production is going in. But it has been proven to be fairly effective, and it's one way to remove carbon from the atmosphere. It doesn't have a lot to do with clean water per se, but certainly carbon capture has a great deal to do with trying to mitigate the effects of the carbon we've been pumping into the air. And of course, as others I think have pointed out, when you've got a global warming event, you have the reduction of the carbon capture elements that you have currently. In other words, as the glaciers melt, it releases the carbon from the underlying material. As forests burn, you have massive carbon release events. And these are the things you have to mitigate, because if you stop putting the carbon into the air, you don't have to work so hard to remove it. But I would look at Greenland as the quintessential case for carbon capture right now.
Thank you, Professor Rob. Thank you especially all of our speakers for your excellent contribution for this World Talent Economy Forum. And I want to give special thanks to CASA for giving us this opportunity for World Talent Economy Forum, as well as Asia Pacific Green Caucus. As a think tank, you also support World Talent Economy Forum. And in these discussions, through these discussions, actually, we are trying to develop this resilient Malaysia concept. And Malaysia actually ready for global opportunities. This pillar of resilient development is the well-being of environment, social and economy. The concept of resilient Malaysia ready for global opportunities would bring out initiatives that are backed by technology and innovation for climate, green technology, and low carbon, and applied solutions that would transform cities and infrastructure. Malaysia is an excellent place. Besides that, Dubai Expo is it's a really great expo where all of the largest corporations as well as governments and academia, we are working together. And through this Dubai Expo, we can help more the global community. From the COVID-19 situation, we can understand we need more global collaborations. We need more global partnerships. And developed nations, they have a lot of technology, lot of research works, and a lot of resources. So if we share together, if we work together, and if we develop public-private partnership, hope we can solve many problems. And I believe Malaysia is an excellent place for public-private partnerships. This nation is actually very peaceful, and what actually Dr. Ching says that we have very good food. So I want to welcome all of our speakers in offline, and definitely after the COVID, hopefully we can arrange an international conference in Malaysia, and then this kind of strategy will be more effective. And I would like to give thanks to all of our audience, those who always support us. I know many universities, University Grant Commission, largest corporations, government bodies, NGO, always they support World Talent Economy Forum. Please share our session, share our expert opinions to your government, to academia, as well as to your corporation. Hopefully, together we can solve many problems. And we have our excellent team, and I'm sure with our team, we can solve many developing nations' problems. Thank you, CASA, for your excellent support. Thank you, Malaysian government, especially Climate Change Department, for your support for World Talent Economy Forum. And this is the beginning. This is our 399 episodes. I believe through this kind of open dialogue, through this kind of brilliant mind, through this kind of excellent scientist, politician, corporate persons, we will solve many problems of Malaysia and of this developing nation. Especially we can make a great collaboration. Thank you, Professor Rob, Professor David Wood, Professor Donald, Professor Adrian David Chiok, Senator Sheikhrahman, Professor Viva, Professor Paul, and Mr. Marshall for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Thank you all of our partners. Thank you our audience. Bye-bye and take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.